Hello, cats and kittens, felines and felidae, humans and variant humans, and every race, class, and subclass. Welcome to another edition of Bringing the RPG Cat. Tonight we're doing tabletop lore. We are going to be reading through the Sword Coast Adventures Guide now. This is probably going to be, a slightly shorter series than the one that we just completed, which was the full reading of the Eberron guide, but I think really in the time that they were writing this one in the D&D 5e Pantheon, they were looking pretty stably upon using the Sword Coast and, well, more specifically, the entirety of the Forgotten Realms books as the basis for what they were going to do in 5e. So this book is shorter and it does have a lot of follow-up compendium material, but we're mostly going to just look at this as well as it stands on its own. So thank you everybody once again for tuning in. As usual, tonight's stream is brought to you by GreatMedia.Games. We are partnered with the GreatMedia.Games in order to bring you inexpensive TCG single cards. Please visit GreatMedia.Games and use the code 10Finity at checkout for 10% off of your online purchase. The stream is also brought to you by our donation fund, which supports Children's Hospital Colorado through Extra Life. Please follow our link in the chat in order to get to our donation page. We're partnered with the rest of Great Media Games to help this charity, and we will be keeping our link live until December 31st. So thank you everybody who has supported so far, and let's get right to our readings for the evening. So today is December 3rd, and we're getting into the beginning of the holiday season. So for tonight's bonus content, I decided to pick out something that I'm sure is pretty dear to all of our hearts. We are going to read Santa Claus, the Master Toy Maker, a Dungeons & Dragons a full NPC guard designed by Death by Magic in 2016. And so he usually publishes his homebrews on WordPress. If you want to go ahead and take a look at, just the bulk of what he's done, it's all very impressive stuff. He has art by the Duryman, and who's also just a fantastic 5e artist. So let's just go ahead and dig into this little homebrew. Santa Claus, the Master Toy Maker. Alright, and so, well, here's the picture at full width. That's pretty cool. Alright, so Santa Claus, medium humanoid, dwarf, neutral good. Armor class is 22. With which is a red suit, and a little bit more of an elaboration on that. 150 hit points, 20d6 plus 80, and a speed of 25 feet. Strength of 18, dexterity of 16, constitution of 18, intelligence of 24, wisdom of 19, and charisma of 15. Saving throws. 9 against Constitution, plus 13 in Intelligence, plus 10 against Wisdom, skills, plus 10 in Animal Handling, plus 13 in Arcana, 13 plus 13 in History, Insight plus 10, Perception plus 10, Persuasion plus 8, and Religion plus 13. Is immune to fire damage, resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons, and cold. Senses are passive perception are 20. Dark vision is 60 feet. Languages are Celestial, Common, Dwarvish, Elvish, Giant, Gnomish, Halfling, and Primordial. The challenge level for fighting Santa Claus would be 20, and he would grant 25,000 XP. Okay. Armor training. Santa Claus has proficiency with light, medium, and heavy armor. Toy maker proficiency. Santa Claus is proficient with alchemist tools, artisan's tools, brewing tools, thieves' tools, mason tools, and smith's tools. Yep, strong claws. Stone cunning. Whenever Santa Claus makes an intelligence history check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered proficiency in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to the check. Ancient Tinkerer. Santa Claus Master Toy Maker can make a special trinket by spending 1 hour and 100 gold points worth of materials to construct a tiny clockwork device. This device continues to function normally for nearly 100 years, or if he takes an action to dismantle it. At that time, he can reclaim the materials he used to create it. He can create the following devices: a clockwork toy, a clockwork animal, monster, or person, such as a frog, mouse, bird, dragon, or soldier. When placed on the ground, the toy moves 5 feet across the ground in each of its turns in a random direction. It makes noises as appropriate to the creature it represents. The fire starter. The device produces a miniature flame, such as a candle, torch, or a campfire. Using this device requires an action. A music box. When opened, the music box plays a single song at a moderate volume. The box stops playing when it reaches a song end or when it's closed. Dispenser. The device stores 4 vials worth of liquids from potions to drinks. It requires an action to select the vial and drink from it. Spinner orb is a spinning mechanism which has a mesmerizing or alluring image facing one direction. It requires an action to set it. And handy tool, a small device with a small knife, a small scissor, a small nail filer, a mini wrench, a corkscrew, and a toothpick. Arcane recovery. Once per day when Santa Claus finishes a short rest, recovering a combined 10 spell levels worth of slots. That's a lot for a short rest. Channel Arcana. As a bonus action, you speak a prayer to control the flow of magic around you. The next spell you cast gains a +2% bonus to its attack roll, or a saving throw DC as appropriate. Artisan's Blessings. Starting at the beginning of a short rest, Santa Claus can conduct a ritual that grants him the ability to craft a finished item that is at least part metal. This item is completed at the end of the rest. The object can be worth no more than 100 gold points, and as part of the ritual, he must expend metals such as coins or other finished items with a value equal to the item he made. The item can be an exact duplicate of a non-magical item. The Blessing of the Forge. Santa Claus can imbue magic into a weapon or armor. At the end of a long rest, he can touch one non-magical object that is a suit of armor or a simple or martial weapon. Until the end of his next long rest, the object becomes a magic item, granting a +1 bonus to AC if it's armor, or a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls if it's a weapon. Once this feature is used, Santa Claus can't use it again until after finishing a long rest. Soul of the Forge. Santa Claus's Mastery of the Forge grants him a number of special abilities, a +1 bonus while wearing medium or heavy armor, resistance to fire damage. Whenever he hits a construct with an attack, he will deal an additional 20 force damage. The Saint of Forge and Fire. Santa Claus has immunity to fire and damage, and while wearing heavy armor, has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. Smart Mind. Santa Claus has sharp wits and precision for details. He always knows which way is north. He always knows the number of hours left before the next sunrise or sunset. He can accurately recall anything he has seen or heard within the past month. He can create written ciphers, which others cannot decipher unless he teaches them or uses magic. If he can see a creature's mouth while speaking a language he can understand. He can interpret what is said by reading lips. Spell mastery. Santa Claus can cast Identify and Knock at their lowest level without spending a spell slot when they are prepared. Casting either spell at a higher must spend the spell slot as normal. By spending 8 hours in a study, Santa Claus can exchange one or both of the spells chosen for different spells of the same levels. Signature spells. Santa Claus has a gaseous form and clairvoyance as signature spells. These spells are always prepared, and each one of them can be cast once at 3rd level without expending spell slots. Whenever done so, this feature cannot be used again until after finishing a short or long rest. If either spell is cast at a higher level, Santa Claus must expend a spell slot as normal. Legendary resistance, 3 per day. If Santa Claus fails a saving throw, he can choose to succeed instead. Special equipment. Santa Claus, Master Toymaker, is armed with several powerful items crafted himself, which include Santa's sleigh, Santa's chest, winter orb, red suit, red helm, and a ring of wizardry. Spellcasting. Santa Claus, Master Toymaker, is a 20th level spellcaster. Its spellcasting ability is Intelligence. Santa Claus has the following wizard spell prepared. Cantrips at will, Booming Blade, Create Bonfire, Friends, Green Flame Blade, and Prestidigitation. At 1st level, Alarm, Charm Person, Identify, Searing, Smite, and Shield. 2nd level, Detect Thoughts, Heat, Metal, Invisibility, Knock, Snillock, Snowball Swarm. Level 3, Clairvoyance, Elemental Weapon, Gaseous Form, Lightning Bolt, Mouse, Minute Meteors. Level 4, Dimension Door, Fabricate, and Hallucinatory Terrain. Level 5, Animate Objects, Creation, and Legend Lore. Level 6, Drum, G's, Instant Summons, and Globe of Invulnerability. 7th level, Mordenkainen's Sword and Prismatic Spray. Level 8, Control Weather and Maze. And level 9, Time Stop and Wish. So, Santa Claus is, as a matter of fact, one of the only beings that can cast the Wish spell. So, Santa is cool. Santa is indeed cool. He's a spellcaster that we all hope to be. So, especially those of us who actually practice conjuration. Actions. Toymaker's Hammer, melee weapon attack. Hit is 11 1d7 bludgeoning damage. On a hit, it deals 2d6 fire damage. If wielded two-handed, damage becomes 12 bludgeoning instead. Toymaker's Army. As an action, Santa Claus can summon 2d6 plus 4 tiny clockwork toy warriors. The summoned toys appear in an unoccupied space within 30 feet of Santa. The toy warriors are treated as tiny-sized creatures under the Animate Object spells. Summon Reindeer and Sleigh. As an action, Santa Claus can blow on a magic whistle that allows him to summon 8 magical clockwork reindeer companions and his magical sleigh. The reindeer and sleigh appear in an unoccupied space that Santa can see within 30 feet. Legendary actions. Santa Claus can make 3 legendary actions choosing from the options below. Only 1 legendary action can be used at a time and only at the end of another creature's turn. The Santa Claus regains spent legendary actions at the start of its turn. A snowy step, Santa Claus can move up to 30 feet to see an unoccupied space that he can see. A belly rub, Santa Claus can rub his belly and impart powerful magic that protects him from harmful effects, granting himself advantage on saving throws against spells and resistance to spells until the start of his next turn. Hammer Strike, Santa Claus makes a melee weapon attack with his Toymaker's Hammer. And Holiday Slam, Santa Claus strikes the ground with his Toymaker's Hammer, sending a wave of fire and thunder outward. All creatures within a 15-foot radius take 9 3d6 fire damage and 3 3d6 thunder damage unless they succeed a DC 18 saving throw or take half on a failed save. Alright. Santa's Toy Work Soldier. So, this is part of Santa's loadout, is part of the clockwork toys that he is capable of making using one of his abilities. Standing ready and waiting, these toy soldiers have been proven to be an elegant decorative ornaments crafted by a gilded artisan. Once imbued with arcane energy, these small ornaments become a venerable force for Santa Claus and the fight to safeguard the Christmas holiday season. Standing nearly 12 inches tall, these toy soldiers are intricately crafted from various materials. Painted uniforms adorn the soldier's form, and each are armed with a small toy rifle. Wardens of Christmas, each toy soldier is inherently designed to protect Santa Claus and follow his commands. The soldiers also have a deep conviction to protect the spirit and symbols of Christmas, which include the presents that Santa makes for the children of the world and the very children themselves. The toy soldiers work in unison to combat their threats, where some take charge while another group focuses fires with their rifles. These toys never tire, they never know rest, and still work together in order to circumvent any obstacles and obstruct their paths. A single unit, while each soldier has enough autonomy to function and attack independently, the toys' true merit comes from their ability to coordinate as a group. Why is D&D Christmas stuff so cool? It's just so cool. I hope to be bringing you a lot of it, during the holiday season while we're also looking through the Sword Coast Guide. Oftentimes, a group larger than 6 toy soldiers will split into smaller groups, focusing on melee or ranged attacks, and ultimately the toy soldiers will follow whatever orders are given to them by Santa Claus. So, here's the construct sheet. Armor classes of 18, hit points of 21, 66, and speed of 30 feet. Strength of 4, dexterity of 18, constitution of 10, intelligence of 3, wisdom of 3, and charisma of 1. It feels really magical, yes, most definitely magical. Immune to poison damage, resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons Condition immunities, charmed, exhaustion, frightened, paralyzed, and poisoned. Senses are true sight, 30 feet, passive perception are 6. Languages, understands commands given in any language but cannot speak. And the challenge level is 9, 5000 XP. Anti-magic susceptibility. The Santa's toy work soldier is incapacitated while in the area of an anti-magic field. If targeted by Dispel Magic, the Santa's toy work soldier must succeed on a Constitution saving throw against the caster's spell save or fall unconscious for 1 minute. False appearance. While the Santa's toy work soldier remains motionless, it is indistinguishable from a normal toy soldier. Magic resistance. The Santa's toy work soldier has advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. Peak tactics. The Santa's toy work soldier has an advantage on an attack roll against a creature that if at least one of the Santa's toy work soldier's allies is within 5 feet of the creature and the ally isn't incapacitated. Actions are slam, melee weapon attack, plus 8 to hit, reaches 5 feet, 1 creature, and does 1d4 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. Toy rifle is a ranged weapon attack, plus 8 to hit, that deals 1d4 plus 4 piercing damage. Alright, so those are the toy soldiers. Alright, let me close up on the image as well, because I think that there is some really, really good art in this homebrew. Alright, yeah, such pretty art. Okay, the Toy Maker's Arsenal. Santa Claus has a knack for tinkering, toy making, and crafting, but he has been bestowed magical items from his friends and allies, gifts and boons to aid in his quest to safeguard Christmas for all, and spreading good cheer and goodwill. Santa's red suit, heavy armor, legendary, requires attunement. The famous red suit of Santa Claus appears as an intricate coat, but underneath is a thick layer of plate mail armor, crafted by the ancient dwarves from forgotten forges of years long past. Magic armor. The red suit is considered a plus 3 plate mail armor of cold resistance. Insulation. The wearer can tolerate temperatures as low as negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit without any additional protection. If you wear heavy clothes, you can tolerate temperatures of as low as negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow deterrent. The wearer ignores difficult terrain created by ice or snow. The spirit of Christmas, children always identify the wearer as Santa Claus, regardless of the physical effects the wearer may possess. This is considered a charm effect. Enhanced wisdom, the wearer has their wisdom score increased by 2 to a maximum of 24. You lose this benefit while not wearing the red suit. Santa's helm. The helm is a special piece forged from the early days when dwarves, elves, and fae worked for the betterment of the world. Once the race of men arrived, in the hopes of living in harmony with each other, this piece was forged to bridge the gap between worlds. Detect Thoughts. The wearer of this helm can use an action to cast the Detect Thoughts spell, save DC 16 from it. So long as the wearer maintains concentration on the spell, you can use a bonus action to send a telepathic message to a creature you are focused on. It can reply using a bonus action to do so, while your focus on it continues. Comprehend languages. The wearer of the helm can understand the meaning of any spoken language heard. The wearer also understands any written language seen, taking about 1 minute to read 1 page of text. It doesn't decode secret messages in a text or a glyph, such as an arcane sigil, that isn't part of a written language. Dimension Door. You can cast Dimension Door as an action. When you disappear, you leave behind a cloud of glitter and thistle, and you appear in a similar cloud of glitter and thistle at your destination. The cloud lightly obscures the space you left and the space you appear in, and it dissipates at the end of your next turn. A light or stronger wind disperses the cloud of glitter and thistle. Ring of Wizardry. A special ring was crafted and forged for Santa by the ancient Fey lords and ladies. While attuned to this ring, Santa gains 1 additional spell slot for each level up to 4th level. Winter Orb. Wondrous item artifact. To keep record of the good children of the world, Santa employs the power of an ancient orb designed to see and listen to the happenings beyond his home. With it, he can see if the children have indeed been naught or nice. Scrying. The wielder may use an action to cast the Scrying spell. The target must make a wisdom saving throw, base DC 18. On a successful save, the target isn't affected and cannot be scryed again for 24 hours. On a failed save, the user can see and hear the target as if they were there. The sensor moves with the target remaining within 10 feet for the duration. Santa can target a location he's seen before as a target of this effect. The sensor appears at the location and doesn't move. Santa's chest. Santa Claus has a special chest to keep all the toys and presents for the good boys and girls of the world. There are stories that the ancient toy maker houses ancient items, relics, and artifacts within this chest as well. The chest and its contents are hidden in the ethereal plane. Santa keeps a small replica of the chest and can use an action and touch a replica to recall the chest. The chest appears in an unoccupied space on the ground within 5 feet of Santa. Bending the chest back to the ethereal plane requires an action and the ability to touch the replica. Santa's sleigh. This wondrously red sleigh has carried its rider for many Christmases, always able to carry the near infinite weight of presents to be delivered. Pulled by 8 clockwork reindeer, the sleigh was crafted by Santa with wood gifted by elves and wood nymphs. Various enchantments are placed within the sleigh to keep its rider safe each Christmas night ride. Flying. The overall weight of the vehicle is reduced and enhanced. It can hover and fly and moves in a direction directed by the 8 clockwork reindeers. The sleigh has a carrying capacity of 1,000 pounds and a flying speed of 50 feet. While on the ground, it has a base speed of 40 feet. Breathable air. There's a bubble of breathable air that surrounds the driver's seats and the passenger seats. The sleigh has enough air to sustain 4 medium-sized creatures for 8 hours. And resiliency. The wood used to craft the sleigh was augmented by magical enchantments to strengthen it against any form of physical harm. It has damage resistance to all damage and damage immunity to poison and psychic damage. Oh, what fun it is to ride. Alrighty, so that was Santa Claus as an NPC as written by Death by Magic. And so we're going to go ahead and we are going to start reading the first section of the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. You love it. I love it. We all love it. 'Tis the season to appreciate Santa Claus-based Dungeons and Dragons homebrews. And to all a good night. I don't know. It's too early to say to all a good night because I usually say that at the end of the stream. I don't really know. Anyway, tonight, well, let's see. Chapter 1. Welcome to the Realms. In the world of Toril, between the windswept Sea of Swords to the west and the mysterious lands of Kuratur to the east, lies the continent of Faerun, a place of varied cultures and races. Faerun is dominated by human lands, be they kingdoms, city-states, or carefully maintained alliances of rural communities. Intersped amongst the lands of humans are old dwarven kingdoms and hidden elven enclaves, assimilated populations of gnomes and halflings, and more exotic folk. A great deal of adventure is to be had in the realms for those willing to seek it out. The routes between cities and nations often cross into the territory of brigands or marauding humanoids. Every forest, swamp, and mountain range has its own perils, whether lurking bandits, savage orcs and goblinoids, or mighty creatures such as the giants and the dragons. Ruins dot the landscape in the caverns that wind beneath the surface. In these places, treasures of every living race and a number of dead ones wait for adventurers intrepid enough to come and claim them. Faerun is filled with rich history and wondrous tales of adventure and magic, but the lifeblood of its common people is agriculture and trade. Most rural folk depend on farming to eat, and Faerunians who live in cities ply skilled trades or use brawn to earn their keep, so they can purchase the goods and food provided by others. News and gossip are carried between population centers by caravans and ships that bring in supplies for trade, and by traveling bards and minstrels who recount or invent stories to inform and entertain people in caverns, inns, and castles. Adventurers also spread news while also creating it. The common folk of Faerun look on adventurers with a mixture of admiration, envy, and mistrust. Folk believe that any stalwarts willing to risk their lives on behalf of complete strangers should be lauded and rewarded. But such adventures, if they become successful, amass wealth and personal status at a rate that some people find alarming. Even people who admire these adventurers for their energy and their acts of valor might have some misgivings. What horrors will be unleashed if adventurers, heedless or unknowing of the danger, unlock a ruin or a tube and release an ancient evil into the world? Most of the people who populate the continent have little or no knowledge of lands outside of Faerun. The most educated among the populace agree that Faerun is but one continent, and that Toril is the whole of the world, but for the majority of people, we don't experience intercontinental travel or extraplanar exploration. Faerun is more than large enough of a concept for them to comprehend. Except in the most remote or insular places, Faerunians are accustomed to seeing people of different cultures, ethnicities, and races. Only in the most cosmopolitan areas does such casual acceptance extend to the evil humanoid races, such as goblinoids, orcs, and drow. Well, that kind of shows your biases. To say nothing of even more dangerous creatures. Adventurers tend to be more tolerant, accepting exiles, misfits, and redeemed folk from strange lands, and with unusual shapes. Holy cow! That is a sentence that I read out loud. The Sword Coast in the north. Running along the Sea of Swords from north of Am to the Sea of the Moving Ice, the Sword Coast is a narrow band of territory dominated by the city-states of the area, and that use that sea for trade. For those who care about such things, the area is delimited by Neverwinter in the north and Baldur's Gate in the south. But territory farther to the south and south that isn't under the sway of a more influential power is usually also included in maps of the Sword Coast. Okay, I am innocent, Devon. Turn off the headlights. More broadly, the north refers to all the territory north of Am, split into two general regions, the Western Heartlands and the Savage Frontier. The Western Heartlands encompasses a narrow strip of civilization running from the Sunset Mountains to the Sea of Swords, and northward from the band of territory marked by Cloud Peaks and the Troll Mountains into the Tradeway. The Savage Frontier is a name given to the rest of the unsettled, or sparsely settled territory in the north, not including the major cities and towns and any settlements in their immediate spheres of influence. Most of the communities, nations, and governments of the North can be grouped into 5 categories. The cities and towns that are members of the Lord's Alliance, the dwarf holds that have been put throughout the area, the island kingdoms off of the coast, of the independent realms scattered up and down the coast, and the subterranean environs of the Underdark. Each category is discussed briefly here. More details can be found in Chapter 2. The Lord's Alliance is a confederation among the rulers of various northern settlements. So, let me take an aside here, and let me just go ahead and say that the 4 major guilds of the Sword Coast is probably one of the longest continuous themes that runs through Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So, we're going to go ahead and we're going to give a description. If we run into it in a future book, we're more than likely to skip it. So, I digress. The Lord's Alliance is a confederation among the rulers of various northern settlements. The number of members on the Council of Lords, the group's governing body, shifts depending on the changing status of member cities and political tensions in the region. Currently, the Lord's Alliance counts these individuals as council members: Laeral Silverhand, the Open Lord of Waterdeep; Dagalt Neverember, Lord Protector of Neverwinter; Tairn Hornblade, High Mage of Silvery Moon; Ulder Ravengard, Grand Duke of the Baldur's Gate and Marshal of the Flaming Fist; Morwyn Daggerford, Duchess of Daggerford; Salen Ramur, Marchion of Mirabar; Dowell Harpel of Longsaddle; Dag Nabbit Waybeard, Queen of the Mithril Hall; Lord Donner Ilzimer of Amphail; and Nestra Ruthial, Water Baron of Yatar. The Lord's Alliance uses the strongest mercantile powers of the North. In addition to providing military support and a forum for the peaceful airing of differences, the Alliance has always acted under the principle that communities with common cause engaged in trade are less likely to go to war with one another. By maintaining strong trade ties, the Lord's Alliance helps to keep the peace. The Dwarf Holds of the North. The various dwarven communities of the North are heirs and survivors of Delzorin, the great North Kingdom of long ago. Despite continuously warring over centuries of orcs and goblinoids of the region and having to fight off assaults from below by Dwargar and Drow, the Shield Dwarves have stood fast, determined to hold their halls against all threats, and when necessary, reclaim them. Halls that survive from the days of the Delzoun include Mithril Hall, Citadel Adbar, and Citadel Felbar. Let's see. Shiny's 95 ZMO, thank you very much for following. Welcome to the stream tonight. The fabled city of Gauntlegrim, built by the Delzone Dwarves, and recently taken back from the Drow, stands as a beacon of resurgent dwarven strength in the north. Stonehold Shaft and Ironmaster are lonely settlements, continually girding themselves for threats, real or imagined. Sundabar and Mirabar are also generally considered dwarfholds, despite their substantial human populations. Until recently, many of the dwarfholds were members of the Civil Marches, also known as the Lurar, an alliance of cities that provided mutual protection across the north. Disagreements and failed obligations during a war with the Orc Kingdom of Many Arrows destroyed the remaining trust between members of the Marches, and that pact is no more. The dwarfholds still ally with one another and individually with nearby human realms, but no longer pledged to stand unified with all their neighbors. Gauntlegrim? I've been there. It's pretty big, yeah. I think, the major trade realms in Terra are probably best described as being really big. Always being really big. The island kingdoms off the west coast of Faerun are a number of island realms of varying sizes. The most distant and is perhaps the most symbolically important to the mainland is Evermeet, the island paradise of the elves, reputed to be a part of the divine realm of Arvindor. Much closer to Faerun are the Whalebones and the Rutharim, ancient homes of the ancestors of the Eluskan people, and the Moonshays, where many say those same people now share the islands with the folk and an elf offshoot known as the Luyer. The Luyer. So, sometimes I take Hispanic pronunciations and I would say it's the U-year. But, it's one of those two. The free port of Mintarn lies nearby, a neutral state for meetings between enemies and a recruitment spot that offers abundant jobs for sailors. Gruyere. Gruyere. Where does Gruyere come from? I kind of understand the reference. Despite its size, the tiny island of Orlumbor, with its treacherous harbor and skilled in-demand shipwrights, is an independent and influential nature unto itself. In the seas to the south, pirates of many races and predictions sail from the Nalanthra Islands, preying on trade running north and south along the coasts. Since the beginning of the Sun Ring, fabled Lantan and Nimbrel have returned. Both the center of invention and the Isle of Lyra worshipping illusionists are even more secretive and less welcoming of strangers than before their disappearance. The Independent Realms. Interspersed amongst the fortresses of the dwarves and settlements are protected by the Lord's Alliance are significant sites that have no collective character, except they exist loudly outside the projection or the purview of the great powers of the region. Cheese. Gruyere is cheese. Yes, okay. I get that now. Who am I to disagree? Oh, the cheese puns are about to start flying. Even the civilized locals among these places, such as Eltegard, exist at best, in an uneasy tension with the denizens of the wilder lands within and just outside their borders, and survive only through constant vigilance and a steady recruitment of new defenders. A great variety of independent nations and notable locations is encompassed within the lands of the north. Among them are the great library of Candlekeep, home of the greatest collection of written lore in Faerun, the imposing giant-scale castle of Darkhold, the fortified abbey of Helm's Hold, sites of such great battles as the Battle of Borsker Bridge and the Battle of the Fields of the Dead, realms of some security such as Eldegard and Hartsfield, and the Yuan-Ti realm of Najara. The lands of the Uthgard, the towns of frigid Icewind Dale, the quiet Trelta Hills, the cutthroat city of Leskin, and the legendary Warlock's Crypt, dominion of the great Lich Larlock, are all independent realms, as are the High Moor, the Trollclaws, and the High Forest. There is much danger and adventure to be had in the free places of the north, and a great deal of wealth and treasure as well. The ruins of ancient kingdoms and countless smaller settlements litter the countryside, waiting for the 8 explorers to happen upon them. The Underdark. Extending miles downward and outward between the surface of Faerun and reaching to other continents, a great network of subterranean caverns known as the Underdark is home to all manner of strange and deadly creatures. Dwergar and Drow, dark reflections of dwarves and elves, live in these sunless lands, as do the Svirfneblin, I'm sure that's the pronunciation, or the deep gnomes. Most surface-dwelling folk aren't threatened or even disturbed by the denizens of the deep places, but the creatures occasionally emerge to raid or seek some kind of goal in the surface world. Among the lands of the Underdark beneath the north are the This is going to be a point of contention throughout the entire reading. Svirfneblin city of Blingdenstone, the Dwergar city of Gracklestug, and the infamous Drow city of Menzoberranzan. Also important is Manteldareth, a trading post for Underdark merchants. Svirf. Think like Svirf. Svirf Neblin. Svirf Neblin. I just need to put that together phonetically in my head. Toril and its lands. Toril is a vast and wondrous world filled with immense diversity of peoples and a rich full history. For most folk of the Sword Coast, however, knowledge doesn't extend much beyond the confines of the north, and anything known outside of the Faerun proper is based more on rumor than fact. Faerun, the vast central continent of Toril. Faerun is a landmass divided by a great sea known as the Inner Sea, or the Sea of the Fallen Stars. The lands beyond the north can be roughly divided into those in the south and those to the east, becoming more foreign to the folk of the Sword Coast, and the north the farther away they are. Lands to the south of the Sword Coast, there lies an ancient nation, a tremendous forbidding jungle, and all manner of lands destroyed or transformed by the magical cataclysms and upheavals. Amid the ruin and the distress in these realms are signs of renewal and hope, as the nation's civilizations and peoples rebuild, reclaim, and create anew. A nation led by the representatives of 5 noble families, Amn is a place where the wealthy rule, openly and without pretense. Shrewd traders and ruthless in business, Amnians believe that the end of a successful transaction is justified by any means, ethical or otherwise. But the nation is richer by far ever than the northern metropolises of Baldur's Gate and Waterdeep. Its influence is curtailed by the unwillingness of its rulers to work together in the nation's best interests. The members of the Council of Five are fairly unified, tight-fisted, and in control of Amn, but their ability to affect events outside their own borders is limited because they can't agree enough on major matters of foreign policy. The oligarchs usually control their nation, but beyond the areas that each rules, their families and businesses compete with one another, and the locals of far-flung places. The use of arcane magic is illegal in Amn, meaning that the only authorized spellcasters in the nation are wielders of divine magic, who enjoy support and the patronage of a temple, and users of arcane magic who have been given special dispersion by one of the oligarchs. So persuasive is the sway of Amn's oligarchy that a few crimes merit physical punishment, but those that involve the use of arcane magic or an offense against one of the council's merchant houses. Other infractions are forgiven after the miscreant makes a payment of an appropriate fine. Error sounds like error. Yeah. I believe so, yeah. Clamishan. This southern land has belonged to the battleground for warring genies. After years of struggling beneath their Genasi masters, human slaves arose to follow a choice of Ilmater, first by using nonviolent resistance and then erupting into a full rebellion following its disappearance. They overthrew the genie lords of Kalimport and Memnon, casting the remaining genies out of the cities and back to their elemental homes or into the depths of the deserts. Much of Kalimshan is a chaotic place dominated by wealth, political influence, and personal power. Many pray for the return of the Chosen and the completion of his work. Others are learning to live together without genie masters, and to grudgingly accept the remaining genasi among them. Chult. The vast, choking jungles of Chult hide what many believe to be great mineral wealth, including large gemstones and veins of ore. Poisonous flora and fauna riddle the jungles, but some still brave the dangers to seek their fortunes. Some of the exotic plants that grow only in Chult fetch high prices in mainland markets. Ruined Mesro stands across the sea from Kalimshan, waiting for explorers and its displaced people to cleanse the city of its undead inhabitants and uncover the treasures that lie hidden there. Eastward, among the Chultan Peninsula, lie the remains of Thindal and Samarak. Despite the apparent fall of both civilizations, Thindal remains infested with the Yanti, while the illusions cloaking Samart's mountain passes conceal the activities in that nation's. Dambrath. Situated on a warm plain on the shore of the Great Sea, Dambrath is ruled by nomadic clans of the human horse riders who revere Sylvanas. Let's not try to be political here. Malar and occasionally Saloon. Given the Dambrathan's history of dominion by the Crinti, a ruling caste of half-drow, it is no surprise that they reserve their greatest hatred for the drow. The clans meet twice a year at a sacred site known as the Hills of the Kings, where dozens of totem sculptures are preserved. At these gatherings, each clan updates a totem with an account of its exploits over the previous seasons. Many Dambrathans seek out lycanthropy as a means of showing revengeance for their favored deity and honor their heritage. Elf Harrow, a blasted near desert north and east of the North Wall Mountains bordering Hallura. Elf Harrow isn't a name bestowed by its residents, but rather the sobriquet that travelers use for this violent region. The tribes of xenophobic elves that claim this area don't hesitate to discourage uninvited guests by any means necessary. A simple group of pilgrims might be scared off with some arrows, while a band of hunters or explorers is likely to be killed outright. Food is sparse in this region, with the forest long since vanished, and as a result, the elves of Elf Harrow fiercely protect the herds of animals they have cultivated. The elves have no interest in looting the cities of fallen Lapalia, but neither are they willing to allow adventurers free access to these lands through their territory. Halrua. Once believed destroyed in the conflagration of the Spell Plague, Halrua has largely been restored to the insular, magic, mighty nation that it once was. Because of the foresight of their divinations, Halruan wizards were able to use the raging blue fire that followed Mistara's death to propel their nation southwardly into the realm of Toral's twin, Abir, displacing part of that world into the plane of shadow. Now that the events of all of those times have mostly been undone, the famed Halruan skyships and waterborne vessels have spread out from their home once again, seeking to establish trading routes and political connections, as well as to learn what has changed of the world in their century of absence. Pardon me. The Lake of Steam. Far to the south and east of the Sword Coast, the Lake of Steam is more accurately an inland sea. Its water is tainted by volcanism and undrinkable. Around its perimeter is a conglomeration of city-states and minor baronies typified by the shifting domains known as the Border Kingdoms. Here, along the southern shore of the lake, explorers and fortune seekers squander their amassed wealth building castles, founding communities, and drawing loyal vassals to them, only to have all those good works disappear within a generation or two. In some cases, one of these realms is fortunate enough to be saved from its inevitable decline by another group of successful adventurers who inject enough wealth and wisdom to keep the enterprise going for a few more decades. Luiren, long the homeland of halflings, and thought to be the place where their race had its genesis, Luiren was lost during the Spell Plague to a great inundation of the sea. In the centuries since that great disaster, the waters receded, and now stories told by travelers from the south tell of the halfling communities that served as island redoubts. Tether. Tether is a feudal realm created by Queen Anais from its capital Adaramar. The queen commands her dukes, who in return receive homage from the counts and countesses of the realm, appoint sheriffs over their countries, and generally maintain order. The farmlands of Tether are abundant, and the markets flow freely with trade from the western heartlands. Tether has been seen more than its share of noble intrigue and royal murder, and adventurers who are native to Tether or merely passing through that land are often drawn into such plots such as unwitting accomplices or as easy scapegoats. Lands to the east lie many of the older nations of the realms, including the western heartlands of Faerun. Those civilizations centrally located on the continent and thereby best able to take advantage of the trade routes and access to the Sea of the Fallen Stars. As in the north, there are cold lands to the east as well as more temperate regions. As one travels further from the Sword Coast, one moves from lands not so different from one's own places, so foreign that they might as well exist on other continents or worlds. which a few of them actually have done. Aglarond. The great peninsula of Aglarond juts out into the inner sea and into the body of water in the forests of the Urward, define much of the nation's character. A realm of the humans living in harmony with their elf and half-elf neighbors. Agarland has been a foe of the Thay for centuries, in part due to the temperament of its former ruler, the Simbol. The nation is now ruled by a Simbarch council, which has backed away from open hostels with Thay. With the restoration of the Weave, the ongoing changes to the political landscape and calls for elven independence within the nation, it is unclear what sort of place Aglarond will be in a generation's time, except that its potential for great change will one day be realized. Regions of the Realm. The Cold Lands, Damara, Narfell, Sosol, and Vasa. The Heartlands, Cormyr, the Dale Lands, the Moonsea, and Sembia. The Lands of Intrigue, Am, Kalasham, and Tether, also known as the Empires of the Sands. And the Old Empires of Chisenta, Mulhorand, and Unther. Chisenta, a collection of city-states bound by common culture and mutual defense. Chisenta isn't truly a nation. Each city boasts its own heroes, worships its own gladiatorial champions, and spends as much time insulting and competing with the other cities as it does on any other activity. The city of Luchtek is dominated by worship of a bizarre deity known as the Entropy, where Erebos is ruled by the latest incarnation of the red dragon known as Char the Undying. Heptios... Char the Undying, the latest incarnation of the red dragon known as Char the Undying. So, I think that is suggesting that Char lives this long as a result of reincarnation. Either that, or it's a really, really terrible name for a title. Heptios contains the largest library in Chisenta, a center of learning where all the nobles aspire to send their children for tutoring. The city is looked upon with disdain by the people of Echinex, whose militant contempt for the fat philosophers of Heptios is widely known. Torius welcomes all visitors, even from those lands that are despised or mistrusted, and foreign coin can buy nearly anything there. The floating city of Airspur still flies somehow, its earth motes unaffected by the fall of its fellows when the sundering came to a close. Cormyr. For most folk in central Faerun, the notion of a human kingdom is inextricably linked to Cormyr. A strong realm bolstered by its loyal army, the Purple Dragons. A cadre of magical defenders and investigators, the War Wizards. And numerous wealthy and influential nobles. Cormyr is recovering from its war with Sembia and Netheril, a conflict that cost the nation much, but left the kingdom standing, and which in the end Netheril did not survive. The pride of that victory remains strong in Cormyr's collective consciousness, even as Queen Rhirdra draws back from plans to permanently welcome the realm, towns that lie beyond Cormyr's traditional borders. Cormyrians are justly proud of their homeland, and go to great lengths to guard it in its honor. Still, there's no shortage of danger in the Forest Kingdom, whether from scheming, treacherous nobles, monsters of the Hulk Forest, or the Stonelands, or some ancient hidden magic. Cormyr is many things, but dull is not one of them. The Cold Lands, the nations of Damara, Narfell, Sosol, and Vasa, known collectively to most Faerunians as the Cold Lands, rest near the Great Glacier in the cold, dry environs of the northeast. Few people outside the region have much interest in what goes on there, except for those in the immediately surrounding lands, who fear a resurgence of the ancient evils of the region, though they aren't fearful enough to do more than send an adventuring party or two into the area to investigate. In Damara, the usurper King Yaren Frostmantle sits on the throne of the Dragonbane dynasty, while his people complain about his tyranny and the growing threat from demons across the country. In Narfell, skilled riders and archers hunt, raid, and are gradually reclaiming their heritage as a great nation of mages who treated with devils. The warlock knights of Vasa threaten to break the bounds of their nation and invade Damara, the Moonsea, or both, while some of its members suspiciously eye the ominously silent Castle Perilous, perhaps planning another excursion to the place. The tiny nation of Sasol trades with its neighbors, but shares very little of itself with the wider world. The Dale Lands. The humans who call the Dale Lands home want nothing more than lives untroubled by the concerns of larger nations. They take great pride in their peaceful coexistence with the elves of Cormanthor, and in their ability to remain largely self-sufficient and autonomous, even when their homeland was used as a battlefield by Cormyr, Netheril, Sembia, and Myth-Draenor in the recent conflicts. Okay. Well, obvious spam is obvious. Let's see. Well, it was nice while it lasted. Featherdale and Tesserdale have reasserted their independence since the end of the war and rejoined Archendale, Battledale, Daggerdale, Deepingdale, Harrowdale, Mistledale, Scardale, and Shadowdale on the Dales Council. The High Dale did the same shortly afterwards. I don't think he felt as though he was left with a choice. Dale's folk are mistrustful of anyone unwilling to sacrifice for the common good, but those who put in good work, whether in defense or labor, are accepted as equals, entitled to share in the rewards from their toil. The Horde lands, formerly known as the Endless Waste, this land has gained a new name among Faerunians, styled after the vast Tweegan horde that roared out of the street and rode against Faerun more than a century ago. After these tribesfolk were defeated, some of the fierce mounted warriors who survived the conflict gathered to form the small nation of Yemunahar. Some others cling to the old ways, mastering the sword and the bow and riding across the steppes on their short-legged horses. Brave merchants still traverse the Golden Way and from Koratur, but those who return from such a voyage are fewer than they once were. Impetur. With the rising of the waters of the Sea of the Fallen Stars, some of Impetur's wealth and influence is returning, leading to the whispers among the populace that a lost king of the line, old, will rise up to lift Impetur out of its woes and back into the great nation it once was. Impetur is a nation of humans with pockets and dwarves and halflings among its populace, where once the long royal line sat its throne and was ruled over a unified kingdom. Now a grand council sits around a table and struggles to combat the presence of demons and demon worship within the nation's borders. The Moon Sea. The shores of the Moon Sea have long been home to cities that rise swiftly, relying on vigorous trade and gathering powerful mercenaries to their banners, only to overextend themselves and fall, sometimes crumbling over time, and sometimes dropping like stones from the sky. Now that Netheril and Myth-Draenor have fallen, these two great powers can no longer exert their influences over the Moonsea, allowing the Hillsafar to spread its wings and eye southward expansion. And Mulmizzer to once again further the worship of Bane, Flan, Teshwave, Thentia, and Vunlar, all Moonsea cities where greater powers jockeyed for influence, now work to find their own identities, before an unchecked or malevolent realm swallows them one by one. This region is also home to the ruins of the Citadel of the Raven and Zental Keep, former strongholds of the Zentarim, which the Black Network shows occasional interest in restoring. Mulhorund. Since the Chosen of the Gods began to appear in the last few years, Mulhorund has become a land transformed. Its deities manifested fully in the forms of some of their descendants and swiftly rallied the Mulan to overthrow the Imisarki. Added to the mighty wizard Nezram, known as the Worldmaker, the Mulhundri overthrew the makers of High Ismakar, who fled into the plains of purple dust or to extraplanar safeholds. When the upheaval ended and the Chosen began to disappear, the gods of Mulhorund remained to rule their people, focusing their attention on defending their restored homeland to keep the war in Unther and Tymanther from spilling over its borders. For the first time in centuries, the people in Mulhorund are free, with the gods declaring that slavery shall no longer be practiced along the Mulan since their return. Rashaman, a harsh, cold land filled with hardy folk, Rashomon is a fiercely traditional nation. It is ruled by its Iron Lord, Mangan Uruk, who speaks for the power beyond the throne, the Wyclaren, the society of mass witches that undermine Rashomon's course. The witches wield great powers tied to the land and its magic and guard against evil fae and vengeful spirits. And a small number of male spellcasters, known as the Old Ones, create magic items and weave arcane rituals for the witches. Rashimi witches revere the three, a triumvirate of goddesses they call Bala, the Mother, Keliandra, the Forest Maiden, and the Hidden One. Over the centuries, scholars in other lands have speculated that these deities must be the faces of Shantea, Myliki, and Mistara, respectively. The nation's warriors are a fierce, stoic lot famed for their strength, endurance, and stubbornness in battle. Rashomon is a long-standing enemy of Thay, and has often thwarted that nation's ambitions to rule Faerun. Little pleases a Rashemi warrior more than the chance to strike down a red wizard in battle. Sembia. Following a period of subjugation at the hands of the Netheri, Sembia is already on its way to becoming the economic power it was in prior years. Although relations are cool with the Dales and Cormyr following the most recent war, Sembian merchants are quick to dismiss previous conflicts as the work of the Netheress, and remind their former trading partners of the long and mutually profitable relationships they previously enjoyed. To prove its good intentions, Sembia has allowed Featherdale and Tasseldale to regain their independence, even though Sembian investors had owned much of Featherdale for nearly 70 years when the war came to an end. Before Netheril claimed Sembia as a vassal state, mercenary work and adventuring were popular livelihoods among Sembians who didn't have local families to feed. Those endeavors have been even more popular now among veterans of the war, who are better trained than their predecessors were. A few of Sembia's less scrupulous former soldiers have taken to banditry, which offers other Sembians more opportunities for guard work. Thay. For centuries, one of the greatest concentrations of magical might in Faerun, Thay is ruled by the ancient lich Sras Tam and the nation's council Zulkers in a ruthless magicocracy. The council's will is enacted by regional Tharchians and bureaucrats, leaving the ruling red wizards to focus on magical study and more important arcane matters. For a time, living mages couldn't hope to advance prominence in Shay. Sras Tam promoted undeath as a means of existence with boundless possibilities, and held back those who didn't agree with his philosophy. The recent battles with the demon Eltab, however, have prompted Sras Tam to loosen his structure. The living now have hope of ascending within the Red Wizards, even if that hope is merely to advance to a high station within the cadre of Tam's servants. Thesk, reminders of the century-old war with the Thuigan Horde, pardon my French, remain throughout Thresk in the many and varied features of its present-day inhabitants, namely the half-orc descendants of the mercenaries who fought in that great conflict. Thesk is known to many as the gateway to the east because it is the western terminus of the Golden Way, which runs through the Horde lands and into Kurator. Because their city is a cross-war of sorts between Faerun and the east, it should come as no surprise that Theskians don't judge other outsiders quickly, and don't bristle at visitors who demonstrate strange quirks in their speech or behavior. The people of Thresk trade readily with any folk, even nearby orcs and goblins, that are willing to treat them peacefully. They aren't fools, however, and have no patience for violence or raiding humanoids of all sorts. Termish. On the southern shore of the Fallen Stars, Termish is a nation of mercantile cities ruled by its assembly of stars, representatives of each of its cities in a parliamentary democracy. After being much diminished by the devastation wrought by this area a century ago, Termish is currently enjoying a revival of its fortunes as the rising of the waters of the inner sea has returned some of the trade that it was lost in the cataclysm. Termish is the birthplace of the Emerald Enclave, which is probably taking credit for the rebirth of Termishian agriculture, the cessation of the great rains that plagued the region a few years ago, and the restoration of the god Lathander. Time Manther, in decades past, the land of the Dragonborn claimed as its territory part of what had been the vanished nation of Unther. Then Unther suddenly returned to Faerun a few years ago, and promptly went to war against Time Manther. The realm has since been reduced to small tracts, mainly along the coast of the Alamber Sea and Ash Lake. The Dragonborn that have withdrawn to those areas have lost none of their military tradition, and their ability to hold a smaller amount of territory makes it unlikely that Unther will push farther anytime soon, particularly since the Untherite navy has been unable to overcome the great beast that guards the harbor of the Gerad Cathendi and the nearby waters of the Alabander. Some of Timanther's Dragonborn have spread across Faerun and gained reputations as competent, highly sought-after mercenaries. The coin of the realm. In Am, they used the Fander, Terran, Centaur, Dontor, Roldon, Cormir, the Thumb, the Falcon, the Blue Eye, the Golden Brown Lion, and the Tricrown. In Sembia, the Steel Pence, an Iron Coin, a Hawk, a Blue Eye, and a Noble. In Silvery Moon, a Glint, Shield, Sword, Dragon, and Unicorn. In Waterdeep, a Nib, a Shard, a Sambar, a Dragon, and a Sun. And in Zental Keep, a Fang, which is a dung piece, a Talon or Nal, which is a flea bit, a Terenth, which is a hard hammer, a Glory, which is a weeping wolf, and a Platinum Glory, which is a flat metal gem. Silvery Moon also mints two special coins, the Moon, and the Eclipse Moon. The Moon is crescent-shaped, shining blue coin of Electrum, valued at 2 unicorns in Silvery Moon and 1 unicorn everywhere else. The Eclipse Moon stamps an Electrum Moon with a darker silver wedge to complete a round coin. It is worth 5 unicorns within the city, but only 2 unicorns elsewhere. But enough about economics. Unther, trapped in another world, the people of Unther have succumbed to domination by others. Then among them arose one who called himself Gilgiam, and he reminded them of their former greatness. Under the leadership of this reincarnated god, the people of Unther rose up as an army to face their masters. On the eve of a great battle, the people of Unther were miraculously returned to their home, and Gilgiam wasted no time in leading them against the Dragonborn occupying their ancestral lands. The Untherites have taken much of the land they formerly held, while seeking to wipe out the quote-unquote godless lizards they blame for their oppression in Abir. Gilgiam wants nothing short of a complete return to Unther's former glory. The achievement will require utterly destroying Timothir, of course, and an eventual war with the Mulhoran to reclaim lands lost century ago. But as every Untherite knows, the great God King is patient, for he is eternal. Westgate, the dismal city of Westgate, isn't a romantic place, but someone seeking employment for shitty work or looking to hire someone for the same will find a few places better suited in all of Faerun. Westgate is considered by some Faerunians as a harbinger of the eventual fate of places like Amn and Semnia, where coin rules over all other considerations. As in many such places, one's moral outlook is less important in Westgate than one's attitude towards bribery. The city's proximity to Cormir makes it a breeding ground for that nation's enemies, including the Fire Knives, a guild of thieves and assassins that the naive pretend do not exist. Karatur. Far to the east, past the waves of the Hordland, lie in the empires of Shaolung, Kozakura, Wa, and the other lands of the vast continent of Karatur. For the most people of Phelan, Karatur is like another world, and the tales told by travelers from its nation seem to confirm it. The gods that human worships in Faerun are known there, as are common people such as gnomes and orcs. Other dragons, neither chromatic nor metallic, dwell in its lands and fly its skies, and its mages prepare forms of magic mysterious even to the archwizards of Faerun. Stories of Karatur tell of gold and jade in great abundance, rich spices, silks, and other goods rare or unknown in western lands. Alongside tales of shape-shifting spirit people, horned giants, and nightmare monsters are absent in Faerun. Zakara. Far to the south, Of Faerun beyond Kalimshan and even the jungles of Chult are the lands of fate, surrounded by waters thick with pirates and corsairs. Zakara is a place less hospitable than most, still braved by travelers who hope to profit from its exotic goods and strange magic. Unlike Karatur, Zakara seems a world away to Faerunians. It is thought of as a vast desert, sprinkled with glittering cities like scattered gems. Romantic tales abound of scimitar-wielding rogues riding flying carpets, and of genies bound in service to humans. Their mages, called Sheir, practice their magic with the aid of genies, and, as it is said, might carry the lineage of these elemental beings in their blood. Beyond the trackless sea, farther to the west, past even Evermeet, are untold unknown lands beyond the trackless sea. Many explorers have visited such lands, and some have even returned bearing tales that change from generation to generation about exotic locales, from island chains that are the sites of countless shipwrecks, to fearsome feather-clad warriors, and vast continents that suddenly appeared while nothing, or something very much different, had rested only seasons prior. Time in the realms, though a number of means exist for marking the days and the passages of time during a year, nearly all folk in Faerun have adopted the calendar of Harptos. Even the cultures and races that don't favor this method of marking time are aware of it, with a result that is recognized across nearly all races, languages, and cultures. A year on Turil consists of 365 days. In the calendar of Hoptos, a year is divided into 12 months of 30 days, loosely following the synodic cycle of Selune the moon. A month is made up of 3 10 days, also known as rides. 5 annual holidays falling between the months complete the 365-day calendar. Once of every 4 years, the calendar of Harptos includes Shield Meet as a leap day following midsummer. Individual days of a 10-day have no special names. Instead, they are denoted by counting from the beginning of the period. First day, second day, and so on. Days of the months are designated by a number and a month name. For example, sages would record event as recurring on 1 Murtal or 27 Uktar. People might also refer to a given day by its relationship to the current day, 10 days from today, or the nearest holiday, 3 days past greengrass. Special calendar days, midwinter, the first festival of the day of the year, known generally as midwinter, though some people name it differently. Nobles and monarchs from the heartlands look to the high festival of winter as a day to commemorate or renew alliances. Commoners in the north, the Moon Sea, and older climes celebrate Dead Winter Day as a marking of the midpoint of the cold season, with hard times still ahead, but now of the worst days now past. Green grass, the traditional beginning of spring. Green grass is celebrated by the display of freshly cut flowers, grown in special hothouses, whenever the climate does not permit flowers so easily, that are given to gifts to the gods, or spread among the fields in hopes of a bountiful and speedy growing season. Midsummer, the midpoint of summer, is a day of feasting, carousing, betrothals, and basking in the pleasant weather. Storms on the midsummer night are seen as bad omens and signs of ill fortune, and are sometimes interpreted as divine disapproval of the romances or the marriages sparked by the day's events. Shield Meet, the great holiday of the calendar of Harptos. Shield Meet occurs once every 4 years immediately after midsummer. It is a day for plain speaking and open counsel between rulers and their subjects, for the renewal of pacts and contracts, and for treaty making between peoples. Many tournaments and contests of skill are held on Shield Meet, and most feasts mark the holiday by emphasizing one of their key tenets. The next Shield Meet will be observed in 1492 DR. High Harvest Tide, a day of feasting and thanks. High Harvest Tide marks the fall harvest. Most humans give thanks to Shantae on this day for a plentiful bounty before winter approaches. Many who make their living by traveling road or sea set out immediately following the holiday before winter comes on in full force and blocks mountain passes and harbors. And the Feast of the Moon. As nights lengthen and winter winds begin to approach, the Feast of the Moon is a time when people celebrate their ancestors and their honored dead. During festivals on this day, people gather to share stories and legends, offer prayers for the fallen, and prepare for the coming goal. Okay. Keeping time from day to day. Most people don't keep track of the day beyond notions such as mid-morning or night sunset. If people plan to meet at a particular time, they tend to base their arrangements on such expressions. The concept of hours and minutes exists mainly where wealthy people use clocks, but mechanical clocks are often unreliable, and rarely are two ever set at the same time. If a local bell or a civic structure has a clock that tolls out the passing of hours, people refer to those hours as bells, as in I will meet you at 7 bells. The shifting of the seasons. The worlds of Abir and Turil drifted apart in 1487 and 1488 DR. In some places this change was accompanied by cataclysm, while others the shift went by without notice. Astronomers and navigators who closely watched the stars couldn't fail to see that there were nights when they seemed to hang in the sky. The winter of 1487-1488 lasted longer than normal. It was then noted that the solstices and equinoxes had somehow shifted, beginning with the spring equinox falling on green grass of 1488 DR. These seasons followed suit, with each starting later and ending later. The shift in seasons has caused some sages and priests of Shantae to consider the marking of some of the annual feast days, but most mark council practice, believing that the seasons will fall back to their previous cycle over the coming years. A brief history. The known history of the Sword Coast region spans thousands of years, extending back to the misty epochs of the creator races and the ages of the first nations of elves and dwarves. Comparatively recent history is a story of the rise and the deeds and the humans of other younger races. Much of which follows in this section is known mainly by sages, some of whom have been alive for the last few centuries of Faerun's history. The common folk across the continent have little knowledge of, and little use for, events that have transpired far away in time and space. News does travel, of course, so even people who live in a village along the Sword Coast might get wind of happenings in distant lands. The Days of Thunder. Tens of thousands of years ago, empires of reptilian, amphibian, and avian people, known in Elvish as Iqua Tel Quisir, the creator races, dominated the world. They built great cities of stone and glass, carved paths through the wilderness, tamed the great lizards, worked mighty magics, shaped the world around them, and war upon each other. Those were the Days of Thunder. The age and the creator races came to a sudden end some 30 years ago. Perhaps their wars reached a terrible and inevitable crescendo, or they tampered with forbidden forces. For whatever reason, the world changed and their vast empires vanished. All that remains of them are ruins and the scattered lizard folk, Bullywug and the Aarakocra tribes, barbaric descendants of those who once ruled the world. The first flowering. From the ruins of the Days of Thunder, there arose nations of proud people, elves and dwarves in the region. The elves raised up the nations of Arvander, Ardeep, and Elithair. They settled Elifarn along the Sword Coast, from the spine of the wood to the river Delambir. Its capital, Aelin Thaldar, in the shadow of what is now Mount Waterdeep. Wood elves and moon elves founded the kingdom of Earthland in the Delambir Valley and the High Forest, and separatists from Erevander and Mayatherzan in the lands of the present-day High Moor and Misty Forest. The dwarf clans united as the nation of Delzun, named for its forge founder, with dwarf hulls built on sites ranging from the Ice Mountains to the Nether Mountains and into the Narrow Sea, with settlements and halls westward to the crags of the Sword Mountains. The proud people regularly defended their homelands against orc hordes that arose from the mountains of the spine of the world and surged downwards to attack and pillage. The first sundering, thousands of years after the rise of the great elven nations. Hundreds of elf high mages united to cast a spell intended to create a glorious homeland for their race. The spell succeeded, but it rippled backward and forward in time, and the land was sundered, changing the face of the world. The longest continent of this new world is called Faerun. Far from its western shores rose the Isle of Evermeet, considered a part of Avendor, and the home of the elven gods on the plain of Aberia and a bridge between worlds. The Crown Wars some 13,000 years ago, war broke out between the 11 nations of Arendar and Mitheriar, beginning a series of conflicts known as the Crown Wars. Lasting some 3,000 years, these conflicts culminated in the dark disaster in which terrible storms engulfed Miyeritar, turning it into a wasteland within a single season, leaving behind the area known now as the High Moor. The High Mages of Aravander are blamed for the destruction, although no proof was ever produced. The vengeful Dark Elves of Elthair continued to corrupt, and demonic powers unleashing them against Aravander in the centuries of destruction that followed. Elf priests and High Mages fervently prayed to the Corlan Lorethan and the gods of the Elven pantheon for salvation. The descent of the Drow. Corvellan interceded the Crown Wars and cursed the Dark Elves so they may never dwell comfortably under the sun. Now finding themselves pained by exposure to daylight, the Drow, in 2 months' time, retreated from the sunlit lands of the world above into the Underdark. They abandoned all loyalty to the elven gods who betrayed and banished them, turning instead to Lolth, the demon queen of spiders, as their patron. War soon began between the Drow and the underground cities of the dwarf. Is that what happened? Well, yeah, that's pretty well as we understand it. I think there was once a famous barbarian that said, if you ever want to learn a Drow history, you merely have to capture a Drow and hold it in a cage for enough time for it to explain all of the diatribe that it has learned since birth. And effectively, this is the kind of stories that they tend to talk about. The age of humanity. For millennia following the end of the Crown Wars, humans spread and settled throughout Faerun as the elven and dwarven nations stagnated and then began a long, slow decline. Deep in the Underdark, the Drow fought wars of survival and conquests in their new domain. The rise and fall of Netheril. More than 5,000 years ago, a group of human fishing villages on the shores of the Narrow Sea joined under the rule of their shaman king Nether, becoming known as the Empire of Netheril. The Netherese learned the use of magic from the Erlani elves and became renowned wizards. Centuries later, they discovered the arcane texts known as the Nether Scrolls in the ruins of Aravander, and subsequently abandoned the practices of the Erlani in order to procure greater magical power. Netheril grew to become an invincible nation of magic and wonders, dominating much of the north for 3,000 years. Then the power-mad Netherese, against Karsus, attempted to usurp the role of the goddess of magic. The resulting disruption in the fabric of magic sent Netheril's floating cities crashing to the ground, destroyed a host of other wards and enchantments, and brought about the end of the Great Empire. The Great Cities. In the decades and centuries following the collapse of the Netheril, many cities of the Sword Coast in the north, such as Elusk and the Citadel Sunbar, took in refugees from the fallen empire, and new settlements made up entirely or primarily of human survivors from Netheril and their descendants were established throughout the north and in the western heartlands. Nearly 1,500 years ago, the human settlers of the Dale Lands and the elves of the Corminthur pledged their alliance in an agreement known as the Dale's Compact. A monument called a Standing Stone was erected to mark the occasion, and the advent of the Dale Reckoning was decreed, beginning with the year 1 DR. The method of numbering the years in Toral's history has spread across Faerun and is commonly understood, if not universally accepted. The city of Neverwinter, called Egrestor when it was a mere settlement, was founded in 87 DR. On the banks of the river Rarin, the humble community of Silvery Moon Ford came to being into 384 DR, and less than 2 centuries later, it had grown to become the city of Silvery Moon. In 882 DR, a village and trading post on the shore of a deep bay in the shadow of a great mountain was named Namor's Hold, after the Utgarth chieftain who claimed the area and fortified it. This place became known to sea captains as Waterdeep, a name that displaced the original within a few generations. In 1032 DR, Agaran, heir to the arts of Netheril, saved the city from itself by unseating Waterdeep's warlord and would-be emperor Rorlor. Agarian declared that wisdom, not strength of arms, would rule in the city from now on, and created the Lords of Waterdeep. These and other nations and great city-states rose to prominence among the Sword Coast, forming a chain along the tradeway from Ilisk in the north to Baldur's Gate in the south, near the borders of Am. Unlike their elven and dwarven predecessors, they fought off attacks by savage humanoids, including orc hordes from the spine of the world. Waterdeep, guided by its mysterious lords, became a rising power, while Old Ilisk fell to the orcs for decades, until it was eventually reclaimed, and the city of Luskin built upon its ruins. The present age. The 4.5 centuries since the establishment of the Lords of Waterdeep have been tumultuous times for the Sword Coast and the world. Through this period, civilization struggles against the savage forces of chaos, and life attempts to persevere against the agents of death and strife, sometimes in places where even the gods themselves have not been exempt from destruction. The last 150 years have comprised one of the most cataclysmic periods in Faerun's history. On no fewer than 3 occasions, Toril has been shaken to its core by forces that have repeatedly rewritten the laws of reality. The time of troubles in 1538 DR, the gods were cast out of their otherworldly domain and made to wander the land incarnated as mortals. In seeking to recover their divinity, they warred among themselves. Magic became unpredictable, and the prayers of the faithful went unanswered. Some of the gods turned mortal were slain, while a handful of mortals ascended to godhood, assuming the responsibilities of the dead deities. The return of Netheril in 1374 DR, the Empire of Netheril, rose again when the floating city of Thulthanther, commonly known as Shade, returned from a nearly 2,000-year-long excursion in the Shadowfell to hover above the Aranarch Desert. The shadow-touched nobles of the city almost immediately began hunting for ancient Netherese ruins and artifacts and preparing for a restoration of their once great empire. The Spell Plague. In 1385 DR, the ascended deities Cyric, aided by Shar, murdered Mystara, the goddess of magic, in her domain of Dwyrmarhart. This act ripped asunder the fabric of magic in the world, unleashing its raw power in a catastrophe called the Spell Plague. Thousands of practitioners of the art were driven mad or killed, while the face of Faerun was reshaped by waves and veils of mystic blue fire. Entire nations were displaced or exchanged with realms from other worlds, and parts of the earth were torn free to float in the air. The Second Sundering. A century after the Spell Plague, the lands and peoples of Faerun had become accustomed to the state of things, just in time for everything to change again. The first indication of new turmoil came in 1482 DR, when Baal, the long-dead god of murder, was reborn in Baldur's Gate amid chaos and bloodshed, leaving 2 of the city's dukes and many of its citizens dead. The return of Baal and his ancient reclamation of the domain of murder from Cyric led some scholars and sages to believe the rules by which all deities must abide were in flux. In 1484, strange calamities began to occur throughout Faerun. An earthquake struck Erebor. A plague of locusts affected Amn. Droughts gripped the southern lands as the sea steadily receded in places. Amidst this tumult, conflict broke out in many regions of the continent. The orcs of many arrows warred against the dwarfholds of the north and their allies. Sembia invaded the Dale Lands. I just kind of strangely lost my place there. And Cormyr raised an army to come to the aid of the Dales folk. Nethril brought forces to Cormyr's border, and Cormyr was drawn into a war on both fronts. Throughout this period, tales began to spread of individuals who had been touched by the gods and granted strange powers. Some of these chosen were at the root of the conflicts that gripped the land. Some seemed driven by divine purpose, while others claimed to be mystified as why they would be singled out. In 1485, the Icewind Dale, the chosen of Earl, torments war with 10 towns and was defeated. In Anauroch, seeing that Netherese forces were spread thin, the long subjugated Bedine people rebelled, having defeated or besieged the dwarf holds of the north. Orcs march on Silvery Moon. In Cormyr, in Sembia, the Netherese and the Cormyrians traded ground while the Daleans began a war zone. As if to offset the drought in the south, in the autumn of 1485, the great rain began to fall around the Sea of Fallen Stars and continued unceasingly. While the waters rose to the east in early 1486, the tide turned against the orcs in the north, and by the end of the year their armies were broken and scattered. Also during that year, the elves of Mythdraenor came to the aid of the Dale lands and helped push back Sembian forces. On the Sword Coast, the host tower of the Arcane rose again in Luskin, along with the Arcane Brotherhood. In Waterdeep and Neverwinter, efforts were made to clear those cities of century-old rubble and neglect. Cormyr repulsed the last of the Sembian and Netherese forces from the nation, reclaiming its territory, and recalled its forces, turning inward to address issues of rebuilding. Late in 1486, the Great Rain finally abated, but this event did not signify an end to the chaos. The Sea of Fallen Stars had grown, submerging great swaths of land and water beneath its waves. Early in 1487, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions abounded for months, as if the whole world were convulsing. Rumors spread of chasms caused by the spell plague suddenly vanishing, and stories circulated of known destinations being further away from one another, as the world had added miles of wilderness to the distance between them. Word began to spread of places and peoples not heard of since the spell plague. It became evident that some of the events of this terrible time had been reversed. During the year, ships claiming to be from Evermeet, Lantan, and Nimbrel, nations thought vanished or destroyed, sailed into ports on the Sword Coast and in the Shining South. Tales spread of the legendary skyships of Halrua being spotted in the southern skies. No longer engaged in Cormyr, Nethril attacked Mythdraenor by floating the city of Shade over it. In a struggle for control for Mythdraenor's Mythal and the Weave itself, the flying capital of Mithril was brought crashing down on Mythdraenor, resulting in a cataclysmic destruction of both. As the year drew to a close, there were nights when the heavens seemed to hang motionless. Throughout much of Faerun, the winter of 1487-1488 lasted longer than any on record. The solstices and equinoxes had somehow drifted. Later seasons followed suit, each with starting and ending later than expected. Prayers to the gods of knowledge and mercy seemed to go unacknowledged, apart from the presence of their chosen. Although the orcs were defeated in the north, the League of Silver Marches disbanded in 1488. Devin says that they've been through so much. Well, of course they have been through so much, because, this is what we call history. Where was I? I think it was, although the orcs were defeated in the north, the League of Silver Marches were disbanded in 1488 as former allies blamed one another for their failures in the war. Sembia divided into 3 separate city-states only nominally allied with one another. While a handful of settlements survived, the Netherese Empire was no more. The remainder of the Netherese forces battled with the Bedine over the control of the Memory Spire, thought to be a tomb of the Farim, Nethril's ancient enemies. The battle awakens what turns out to be a hive of the creatures, and they use the life and the magic-draining power of the Spire against the lands below. By 1489, many of the wars that began during the Sundering ground to a close. Other conflicts of war arose, and mighty threats still imperiled the world, but the deities ceased interfering with the world through their chosen. The gods were no longer silent, but quiet, and in many places new priesthoods arose to interpret the gods' now subtle signs. The world today seems a place filled with new lands and opportunities, where those who dare can leave their mark. Students in history and of history and those elves and dwarves who recall the past as short-lived humans see as distant, perceive a world much like it was over a century ago. For most folk, wild tales of people empowered by the gods in far-off lands returned to this world are the subjects of fireside chatter. Daily concerns and the dangers and opportunities just beyond their doors take precedence, and plenty of both remain on the Sword Coast and in the north. Magic in the realms, from the simplest cantrip to the mightiest workings of high magic. From the blessings of the healing mercy to the raising of mighty heroes from the dead. Magic permeates the realms. Any understanding of magic begins and ends with an understanding of the weave. The weave is an essential element of the universe, running through everything in unseen threads. Some creatures, objects, and locations have deep intrinsic ties to the weave and can perform extraordinary feats that come naturally to them. A beholder's flight, a vampire's charming gauge, a dragon's breath weapon, and so forth. Creatures with the necessary talent and skill can also manipulate the weave to perform magic by casting spells. The weave isn't normally visible or detectable, even through the use of spells. Detect magic does not let you perceive the weave, for instance. The weave isn't magic precisely, any more than a collection of threads is a garment. It's the raw material from which the tapestry of magic is woven. In two senses, both the metaphorical and the real, the goddess Mystara is the weave. She is the keeper and the tender, but all 3 times the goddess of magic has died or been separated from the divinity, twice as Mystra, and once as her predecessor Mistral. Magic has been twisted or has failed entirely. While Mystara's last death and the coming of the spell plague, the weave was not destroyed, the term lost its significance. Since the end of the most recent sundry, both Mystra and the weave have returned to their roles of centuries past, and spells and magic items are more reliable than they had been when the spell plague raged. Well, isn't her death what caused the last spell plague? Yes, and it's her resurrection that actually ended the last spell plague. It is really that simple. Supernatural powers and psionics. The inborn magical abilities of certain creatures, the acquired supernatural powers of people such as monks, and the psionic abilities are similar in that their users don't manipulate the weave in the customary way that spellcasters do. The mental state of the user is vitally important. Monks and some psionics users train long and hard to attain the right frame of mind, while creatures with supernatural powers have that mindset in their nature. How these abilities are related to the weave remains a matter of debate. Many students of the arcane believe that the use of the so-called unseen art is an aspect of magical talent that cannot be directly studied or taught. Magic items. Wherever a spell effect is brought to life by manipulating the threads of the weaves, the creation of a magic item ties some of those threads together in a very specific way to produce the desired effect for as long as the item lasts. The weave provides immediately available energy for spells and also enables those who know the craft to harness that energy inside of an object until it's called forth by that user, who of course needs to be a spellcaster. In some cases, the magic of an item must be tied to its wielder, representing the entwining of the threads of the weave between wielder and object known as attunement. As with all matters related to magic, the number of items to which a single being can be attuned is limited, but the benefits of such a relationship can be considerable. So, the way that this personally applies to me is that, I often carry on my person 2 magical items. One of them is a medallion. The medallion is in the shape of a candle holder, and I actually apply magic candles to it and use that in order to cast my ritual detect magic. The other one is my hat, and so I can also use my hat to cast ritual detect magic just when it is when I need to do it spontaneously, which is what I actually ended up doing in the second episode of One Shots of the Meowing Portal. I mostly use my magical hat for conjuration magic, is that I take off the hat and then I cast the minor conjuration into the hat and then pull out an inanimate object. And so, effectively, these are magical items that were just described in that way, is that there are magic items that were put together through a weave to come out in the specific magic forms that I use. But in order for me, in order to conduct magic spells using from them, I have to possess innate magical ability as a spellcaster. Well, I mean, to say that is a little bit somewhat diminishing because, in my case, since I am a wizard, my spellcasting ability just comes from the depth of the education that I have. And so, effectively, that's really just the understanding of the weave and how it is generally used when with anybody with magic abilities tends to deploy their own spells. So the mythals. Mythals are some of the most powerful magic in the world of Turil. Constructs that bind and shape the weave in a particular location, sometimes so powerfully that the rules of magic or even reality can be bent or rewritten. A mythal is a permanent field of overlapping magical wards and effects tied to a specific location. In its original usage, this term applied to the works of high magic that protected ancient elven cities. It has since been expanded to cover all manner of similar protections, from the immense floating cities of the fallen Netheril to the wards of Silvery Moon to the smaller but no less effective workings of magic that keep safe important locations like Candlekeep. Even the many layered wards and effects of the Undermountain beneath Underdeep are considered a mythal by some. Most mythals are defensive in nature, designed to restrict the kinds of magic that can be employed in the area they govern, and the most common restrictions are concerned with teleportation and conjuration magic. Evreska's mythical influences the weather of the area and our wards and inhabitants against disease, while the mythal of undersea myth Nantar makes its waters breathable and more comfortable for creatures that are not suited to underwater life. In many ways, a mythal is less like a spell or a magical item than it is a living creation of magic, capable of growing stronger or weaker, absorbing damage, or dying. Mythals can also sometimes heal themselves, as did the mythal of Silvery Moon, blossoming out of the Moonbridge following Mystara's most recent return. Each mythal has one or more beings attuned to its effects who can ignore any restrictions on spellcasting, can direct targetable effects on the mythal, and can teach others of appropriate skills how to access its secrets. Except in cities such as Silvery Moon and Evreska, adventurers are most likely to encounter damaged or falling mythals in ruined locations where magic once had great influence. Although an identify spell might reveal some of the simplest effects of a mythal, active restrictions on spellcasting can be discovered only by trying and failing to cast a prohibited spell. A powerful spellcaster might learn to access or repair a mythal without assistance, but such feats are legendary and rarely attempted by even the most renowned of mages. Any elven city with myth in its title, Myth Draenor, Myth Glorek, Myth Nantor, and others, has or had a mythal protecting it. The ruins of such places are certain to have unpredictable effects related to their damaged or destroying mythals. So, there's a little sub box here about weave affecting magic. This might be the last thing that I read tonight. Certain spells allow casters to perceive or manipulate the effects of the weave in particular ways. The weave itself also has irregularities that affect spells. Detect Magic reveals threads of the weave worn together through spellcasting, or the knots of the weave in a magic item. A magic item appears enmeshed in the silvery blue threads of the weave, and the way the threads are arranged reveals what type of magic is used, necromancy, abjuration, and so on. Similarly, active spells in areas imbued with magic are lined in a silvery network of threads, which might twist and reknit themselves depending on the magic involved. Dispel magic unwinds and prematurely ends magic, unraveling whatever construct of the weave was put in place. Anti-magic can dispel existing spells and unravel any magic woven from the weave. Permanent effects, such as those from magic items, are intentionally suppressed by anti-magic. While the effect is within the area of anti-magic, the construct of the weave unravels, but the threads snap back into place once the magic is outside the area. In rare areas of dead magic, the weave is absent. Not only do spells and magic items cease to function, but even the supernatural abilities of creatures that are innately tied to the weave might fail as the knot of the weave they carry with them unravels. And finally, in an area of wild magic, a weave becomes tangled, spontaneously forming its own constructs and resulting magic. It also tends to twist the constructs of the weave created by spellcasting, which causes unexpected results. So, thus far, we have gotten a pretty significant overview of the realm as a whole. And so, for as much as we have actually been discussing, we have not yet begun specifically discussing the Sword Coast, though we mentioned its role in the world as a whole multiple times as we've been discussing this. So, a lot of this stuff, it's a lot more straightforward because unlike when we were reading the book of Eberron, we're not describing a completely and total a reality that is completely and totally divorced from what Dungeons and Dragons is as a whole, and just effectively just as so the familiarity exists a little bit more here than when we were reading the previous book. But anyways, thank you very much once again for tuning in to Brainy the RPG Cat. I remain Brainy the RPG Cat. Remember once again that we are sponsored by GreatMedia.Games. For inexpensive TCG single cards, visit GreatMedia.Games and use the code 1050 at checkout for 10% off your online purchase. This stream is also brought to you by our donation campaign supporting Extra Life. Please consider following our link and giving as much as your finances will allow. Your donation will go directly to help some very unfortunately displaced children during the holiday season. And we are going to continue to keep this campaign running until December 31st. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm going to take a moment and I am going to do a raid. Let's see. Who would we like to visit tonight? I think... that new Marvel Midnight Suns game recently came out. I might consider giving that one a try. It is a little bit more RPG, a little bit more turn-based strategy than most of the recent Marvel Comics games have been. Let's see. So, that might be interesting. Let's see. Okay, so what I think I would like to do is I would like to take us over to Code Channel. Right now they're in the middle of playing Resident Evil 4. So let's go ahead and let's start out with a shout out. All right. Oops, forgot the L. Okay, here we are. I'm not entirely sure there was sound in that clip. So let's go ahead and let's raid them. So, alright everybody. So this coming Sunday I'm going to be doing a filming for the next episode of One Shots from the Meowing Portal. And then we're going to regroup and we are going to come up with the schedule for next week. So thank you everybody for tuning in. You guys have been a fantastic audience. I will see you at the beginning of next week. Until then, have a good night everybody, and thank you so much for watching.